Have you ever known exactly what to say when you're coaching someone, and then sat down to create content and totally gone blank? I used to struggle with this exact thing, and for the longest time, I thought it meant something was wrong with me. But it turns out it has nothing to do with talent, confidence, or even content strategy. So in this video, I'll show you why coaches go blank when they try to create content, why this happens even if you're confident in sessions, and what actually helps your voice come back without forcing it. So let's start with why so many coaches go blank when they try to create content, which is so frustrating because you know you have it in you, but it's not actually showing up. Well, there's a reason that it's not showing up, and it starts at the beginning of your coaching career. Imagine someone starting a brand new profession. Let's say they're becoming a therapist or a pilot or a nurse. It's a huge identity shift. They're excited, but also a little bit shaky. And not just because of the responsibilities, but because they're growing into a new version of themselves that they don't actually know well yet. Now, the good news is they're not thrown into that identity alone. They get mentors, they get supervision, they get classrooms of peers who are all learning together. And that environment actually holds them while their new identity is forming. A bit like scaffolding holds up a building before it can stand on its own. Now, contrast that with a coach. During training, coaches often have that kind of support. They have mentors, practice groups, peers reflecting back this new identity who they're becoming. So at first, a new coach that's learning actually feels confident. They feel excited about this life they're heading into. But the moment the training ends and they're suddenly expected to build a business alone, everything changes. For a lot of coaches, going out on their own as a new business owner is another massive identity shift, but this time they're totally on their own. And that's why a lot of that clarity, confidence, and inspiration suddenly disappears. It's not because they suddenly forgot how to coach, but it's because the environment that was holding them through the process vanished at the exact moment that they needed it the most. And psychologists actually have a name for this. It's identity shock, when who you're becoming no longer matches how your life is structured, and role strain, when you're expected to perform a role you haven't been supported to grow into. And when your identity is changing faster than the system that's supposed to hold it, your nervous system doesn't read this as just another growth moment. It actually reads it as a threat and feels vulnerable. And in that state, it's much easier to go blank, to overthink, or to spiral into self-doubt, even when you're actually really good at what you do. Now hang on, you might be thinking. If identity shock is the reason I'm going blank, then why is it I only go blank when I'm creating content, but not in coaching sessions? And the answer is, it's because coaching is a profoundly relational career. Your clarity as a coach doesn't just come from sitting alone and trying to think harder. It comes alive in relationship to other. When you're with a client, there's real presence, real energy, and you're thinking together to come up with answers to your client's most pressing problems. But for most coaches, content creation feels entirely different. It's solitary, it's high pressure, no feedback, no reflection, just you and the expectation to sound confident, like you know what you're doing. So of course, sitting alone with a blinking cursor on the screen feels unnatural. It feels hard. But here's where it gets really confusing. If being alone were the whole reason that coaches go blank, no one would ever figure this out. And yet every single day, coaches, even sensitive and introverted types, learn to create clearly and consistently in their business. Which means the problem isn't isolation itself. There's something deeper going on. And I stumbled into what that was in my own journey. When I first started creating content, I would sit down, passionate, inspired. I was full of ideas I couldn't wait to share. But then at some point in the process, something would shift. I'd slip out of that confident and inspired place into a more survival place. I felt tense, I felt pressured, I felt way too serious and really frustrated. It was like someone flipped a switch. One moment I was plugged into what I wanted to share, and the next moment I was staring at a camera or a blinking cursor, trying to force content that just wasn't coming. So I started wondering, what would it take to stay in that inspired state even when I'm working all alone? And then one day, while I was listening to a talk by Brené Brown, researcher and author of The Power of Vulnerability, everything kind of clicked for me, because she describes two states that I was experiencing and that we all move between. First, there's the wholehearted state where you feel more whole, more connected, more intuitive, more service-oriented. And then there's the armored state, what she calls armoring up, where we're trying to protect ourselves, we're trying to perform, and we're more self-focused, worried about what other people think about us. Now here's the key to all of this. When things feel vulnerable, when we don't know how what we're about to say is going to land with others, we instinctively armor up and protect ourselves. Next thing you know, you find yourself overthinking, people-pleasing, and being a little bit too perfectionist about everything. But the one type of armor coaches wear more often than others is trying to fit fit in? How should I sound? What's the right way to say this? How can I do this so I don't look stupid? And most of the coaches I work with end up here by default. Because when you don't feel totally grounded in who you're becoming, you start trying to act like someone who's already figured it out. And it's all subtly happening subconsciously. It's like your nervous system is telling you, I don't feel totally safe to be me yet, so let's be the version of me that I think the world wants me to be. And the worst part is when you're trying too hard to fit in, you end up disconnecting from why you do what you do in the first place. You disconnect from empathy, you disconnect from the people you're here to serve, which is the exact fuel your business runs on. Without it, you don't just lose a little bit of clarity and go blank, you actually lose your energy and direction. So what I'm saying is being alone isn't what makes you go blank, but how you respond to being alone does. Your voice doesn't come back by trying to force yourself to say the right thing or to perform when you're alone. It comes back by rebuilding that feeling of connection that got you started with your business in the first place. But how do you actually do that? I get to see what doesn't work and what does all the time with my clients. And what they usually try to do is they just try harder to write. They put more pressure on themselves and nothing really changes. But it's because they're all coming from that disconnected or armored state that we talked about earlier. And we know that the biggest problem with that disconnection is it disconnects from the empathy that your business needs to survive. So instead of asking them to come up with content, I ask them one simple question. Who's one person that you genuinely want to help right now, and what do they actually need to hear? And when they take a moment to answer that question, they start to be more relaxed, the words start to flow, and more of their natural brilliance comes out. And it's not like something magical happened, it's just that we got them out of that performance mode and into a mode that's more real. They somehow need to plug back into that relational field that their voice already knows how to respond to. Responding to a question a client once asked. Imagining one specific person you really care about helping. In other words, speak to someone, not to the internet. That single shift of focus from I need to make content to I'm trying to help someone real moves your attention off of yourself and onto service, which is the same shift that disarms that armor and moves you back into your real self. So stop trying to create things for a big crowd or for the internet and just create for a person, even when you're alone. So that's your first move to start creating content as easily and naturally as you coach. But it won't stick if underneath it all you're still operating from an old identity and feeling like a fraud. So in the next video, I'll show you how to step into your new identity without it collapsing under pressure while you're trying to build your business. Because the real challenge isn't creating trendy content, but it's becoming the version of you that your work is calling for.